Greetings. I am Detective Sergeant Wilfred S. Peterman. Welcome to the 5Cs, the Classic Crime College of Cape Cod, where we teach you how to become a great detective, in the tradition of Sherlock Holmes or Rick Bates, the 85-year-old detective. Today's class will be taught by Chief Bates himself, the #1 crime stopper in all the 48 interlocking states of the USA. And now here is the famous detective.
Thank you. I am the Detective Rick Bates, former police chief of Cape Cod. As I have stated in my book, solving any case, no matter how difficult it may seem, is simply a matter of finding a starting point. I call that the first dot. Then I look for a second dot, and so on until finally I connect all the dots and solve the case. Here now is today's conundrum. See if you can solve it before I do. Some years ago, on an autumn hunting trip in northern Maine, I was informed of a tragedy at one of the local hunting lodges. The local police thought it was simply an accident, but when they heard that I was in town, they called me at my hotel and they asked me to take a look at the case, just to be sure. The victim was John Marshall, a banker from Boston who was hunting with some of his fellow co-workers. In fact, it was one of his own bankers who fired the shot that killed the unfortunate businessman. Yes, he was killed by one of his co-workers.
At police headquarters in Presque Isle, we questioned Martin Butler, the hunter who fired the killing shot. He said it was an accident and we didn't see any reason not to believe him. He was a well-respected Boston banker and was second in command of the Bay State Loan and Bank, which has 12 branches in Boston and 25 more in the suburbs. I was going to let Butler go, but decided it would be a good idea to consult with retired Police Chief Bates.
Hello, Mr. Butler. I'm Chief Bates. Thank you for your cooperation. I know this is a difficult time. Tell me, please, what happened. All of the details. Please leave nothing out. What happened?
It's a bad time for me, Chief. John Marshall was my best friend. I'm in a state of shock, but I will tell you everything that happened. We went out hunting early in the morning. When John hadn't returned to camp at 9 o'clock last night, I was worried, because he didn't know these mountains. There wasn't a single star in the sky, it was dark and there was no moon, so I decided to look around for him. Our camp is 5 miles away from the closest dwelling. I left the camp and began looking for him. After searching for an hour, I was coming up the slope of a ravine when I saw a pair of eyes shining out at me in the dark. Calling twice and getting no answer, I fired. I figured it was a mountain lion. Imagine my horror when I reached the spot, struck a match, and saw I had nearly blown the head off poor John Marshall. A terrible experience. I carried his body back to camp and then walked to the nearest house to report the accident.
Thank you very much for your statement, Mr. Butler. We are just about finished here. Please remain seated for a moment more. Let me review the facts. You stated that you went looking for Mr. Marshall about 9 p.m. You reported there was no moon and that the night was fully dark. You saw a pair of eyes shining in the woods. You feared it might be a mountain lion. After calling out twice and getting no response, you fired the fatal shot, the one that killed Mr. Marshall. Is all of that correct?
Yes, Chief Bates, that is exactly what took place.
Yes, that is what you say happened. And now, Mr. Butler, I have just one more question for you. Why did you deliberately murder John Marshall? For that is exactly what you did. Welcome, Dano. And now, students, it's time for you to connect the dots and find out how I knew that Butler did it. Let's go over the facts, or the dots, as I call them. Here is the first dot. It was a dark night with no moon. Dot number 2. He said he saw a pair of eyes shining. Connect these two dots. On a dark night with no light source, there can be no shiny eyes. Dot number 3. Even if there was moonlight, human eyes do not shine in the dark. It was clearly premeditated murder. And further investigation showed that Butler was stealing money from the bank, and that he was afraid that Marshall, who was his boss, would find out about the thefts. Well, I hope you were able to solve this case along with me. Join me again for another lesson at 4Cs, the Cape Cod College of Crime.